And we are live. Hello everyone. I guess step one is, can you hear me? It seems to be the first thing I ask every single show is the can you hear me into the chat, but I guess that is the nature of these Twitch shows, isn't it? We've got a sign. Thank you, Bubble Reg. We can be heard. So yes, hello and welcome everybody. This is the Beyond Screens Alternative Controller Show. My name is Alistair, and with me once again is my co-host Tatiana. Welcome back,
Hello.
Tatiana.
Thank you. Welcome back too.
Thank you.
And hello, everyone. So in this show, we invite creators of out-controlled video games to tell us about their work and show us what they are working on.
So for those of you who may be new to the world of alternative controllers, what these are video games made to be played using unusual custom-made controllers. For example, someone might have made a game using an electric guitar, or maybe a door stopper, or perhaps even a bowl of custard. Or the creator might have created a totally new object by soldering together electronic components.
And today's guest is Jerry Belich. Jerry is a multidisciplinary game and experience designer from the US. He specializes at, I quote, breathing life into extraordinary creative and technologically based experiences. And among his portfolio is Choosatron. It's an interactive fiction storytelling machine, kind of choose your own adventure game with a thermal printer. So before we welcome Jerry to the stream, let's see the game in action.
Hi, I'm Jerry Belich, a software developer and a storyteller, and I'd like to talk to you about the Choosatron and the stories it tells. The Choosatron is a mini arcade kit that plays choice-based story adventures, and best of all, you get to build it and program it yourself. Imagine a classic choice storybook inside a small machine, and instead of flipping pages back and forth, the words pour out in front of you, only pausing so you can decide what you want to happen next. With an inkless thermal printer, you get to keep every journey. Your support will fund the first manufacturing run of our newly designed circuit boards. This is one of my prototypes that was featured in the July issue of Wired UK. The Choosatron is powered by a Spark Core wireless module, so you can download stories with ease. And best of all, the Choosatron board comes fully assembled, so your kit is a snap to build. There's also a port for connecting two Choosatrons together for our planned two-player feature. Try your hand at a quick round of Prisoner's Dilemma, or explore an ancient temple with a friend. Or maybe a game involving street fighting, where each move is described with excruciating detail. And finally, a USB connection will allow for the Choosatron to be updated and reprogrammed. I will be open sourcing all of its hardware, so it can be free like this dove to update and customize.
So everybody, let's have a big round of applause and welcome to the show, Jerry Belich.
Woo! Woo!
Hi.
Hello, Jerry.
How's it going?
Doing well. How are you doing yourself?
Great.
Doing pretty well. It's interesting to see that video after so many years. I look so young, and then a couple of days ago, I finally got a haircut. I had a bushy beard, and my hair was very pandemic crazy, and I had it all cut off. So now I look quite similar, and it's still startling to me.
So that was the video from the Kickstarter campaign, is that right?
Yes. Yeah, 2013.
Wow. But that was, I mean, it was a successful pitch, wasn't it? Because that was, I mean, you pitched for, was it $22,000?
22,000 US, and then got just a hair over 75,000.
Wow. Nice.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was a little surprising actually, considering what I was selling, but
that's
obviously
super interesting.
There's something that appealed, yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting because, and maybe we can start with this actually. So in the out-control world, there are not so many ways to fund what we are doing. And some of it is by exhibiting and being paid for the exhibit, or maybe we can have some offers as a freelancer that are coming because people heard about our alt-control games. But you did something that is actually amazing, which is managing to kickstart a whole alt-control game. I mean, I don't know any other game that managed to do this. That's like, I'm so admirative of this.
I mean, it honestly, there was been a fair bit of luck involved, frankly, because I happened to hit this sweet spot of something that touched on people's nostalgia. It touched on like storytelling, obviously, and storytelling where the readers are like get to be part of that story. It was very appealing for like younger audiences and older ones, again because of the nostalgia and the tactile aspects of it. Especially kids really loved like seeing it print out right before you, and the artifact, like that was huge for people. The fact that afterwards you got to tear that off and you had this piece that represented your story. So if you play the same game, you're going to come away with a different piece of paper, probably a different length, with a different outcome. And people, I've heard just even now, people when they're like, "Oh, you made Choosatron," they're like, "I still have my printout," and it's super delightful to hear that because it means it meant something. It's this like bookmark of a moment in their lives of having this like particular experience. And I suppose that combined with the fact that it's very, very small and compact, that it's not complicated, like you put in another roll of paper, you're good to go, there's no ink. And the bill of materials was fairly reasonable, which means I was able to do it without completely crashing and burning, because I'd never done manufacturing and any of that before, and it did not go completely successfully,
Right.
but it went successfully enough.
That's very interesting, that usually all control games and game installations in general are supposed to be exhibited. So the experience is quite ephemeral, like temporary, and it's located in time
Yeah.
and space. And here, the idea of getting something from it that you bring home was, I think, also part of the success in it. But the part that is the most interesting for me, because it segues smoothly with my next part, is your background. So you started actually by studying film some years ago now, almost 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
And clearly one of the theme or topic that is coming a lot, a pattern I see in your work, is storytelling and narrative design. Actually, you do narrative design for regular video game, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a content designer, which includes narrative design work for Squanch Games. So I started there the beginning of this year, and yeah, it's been super fun. It's actually the first time I've done full-time work for a studio. Before, it's always been contract. Like I'd done narrative and writing work for Alchemy back when they did Discourse. So like the game where all the people get stuck on the island, and
we
a
have
lot
videos
of people
of
have
this.
horrible deaths. But yeah, it's been exciting to get to do that in like larger teams and kind of be part of a bigger experience. I think a lot of the alt control work for me has been by necessity rather solo, but all of my favorite experiences have been like having the chance to collaborate and build with other people. That's my biggest regret with Choosatron, is all the collaboration was out of desperation, like, and kind of forced, rather than having kind of those collaborators up front and being able to really develop it with them. And so like I'm happy that I was able to develop it, but I wish it could have been something I worked more with other people on in a more structured way.
Yeah, So yeah, just Discourse is a game that is kind of like Lord of the Flies. It's a Lord
Yeah.
of the Flies style game. Maybe we can show it quickly, but it's more regular video game because Jerry is also making narrative design content for traditional video game, traditional in the form, I mean. And
Yeah.
so yeah, your background is also well, 2 decades ago, you were studying more like cinema and film, etc. And then you turned towards computer sciences, and way later into fine arts and experience design, which are the three topics we can find in your work. So that's
Yeah.
not a surprise, actually. Your education is quite relevant. And that's interesting for me that basically your work is very you explore the whole spectrum that goes from artsy art house games to more traditional video game. You have works like I'm thinking about Nature Machine, which is
Mm.
much more artsy. At least I
Yeah.
think it's more artsy. I
Oh,
don't know
very
if you
much.
and it's like a projection installation where you enjoy procedural nature scenes, etc. And on the other side of the spectrum, you did stuff with VR. I'm thinking about Ghost Dentist, which is maybe you can talk about Ghost Dentist because the pitch is incredible.
Um, Ghost Dentist was one of the most fun things I've ever done. I worked on that with a number of other collaborators. Lisa Brown actually recently um, mentioned on Twitter that it was her favorite project to work on, and she like used to work for Bungie and all this stuff. But it was just such a silly, perfect confluence. So primarily the design and work on that was with Mike or Mickey, as I call him, Enoch, doing the coding and stuff, and then Lisa with production and design, and me, a little bit of both of those, and then working on the alternative controller. But the original concept was this was for Train Jam, and I really wanted to do a VR game on Train Jam because it felt like a really bad idea. Like,
You got to
and
explain Train Jam. I'm not
oh,
sure everyone
yes,
knows what
okay,
the
Train
Train Jam
Jam.
is.
It's the most wonderful event created and run by Adriel Wallach that is before GDC, so Game Developer Conference in San Francisco, the big thing that has all sorts of problems, but like we go because we see the people we love, right? But Train Jam starts in Chicago, and we take the Amtrak all the way across the country. So it's a little over half the country to San Francisco. It's like 2.5 days, or 3.5 if we get stuck like we did the last time. And over that course, everybody in the train is making games. After the first couple of years, I think it's gone 6, 7 times now. We were able to buy out the entire train. So it's literally everyone on this full train making video games. And so you collect with people and just like ideate and experiment and come up with something and try and have it finished by the end when you arrive into San Francisco. And so for the year we did Ghost Dentist, I really wanted to try a VR game. I was talking to Mike about it, and he had some VR equipment available. And I was like, I think it'd be really fun to try because it's just like you're on a train, it's moving, it's wobbling around. Like, can you even do VR on a train? And I like Train Jam because it's such a great place to experiment and to fail and to like come out with something where you're like, this is a hot mess, but there's like something interesting I discovered in that experience. Ghost Dentist actually went surprisingly well. And we, the original pitch was I just wanted self dentistry. I thought it sounded awful because people hate going to the dentist. I actually don't. I like the feeling of that metal hook on my teeth, which makes me a monster, I'm sure, but it just
Yeah,
doesn't bother me at
it
all.
does.
Needles don't bother me. The drilling itself, like, it takes a fair bit to really get to me. And so it was basically a joke concept of putting people through that. And it was a response to the type of horror games I was seeing in VR, which I hated, which were all the jump scare ones. And so I wanted to play with that concept of like, well, what if you're the one like doing the horror like on yourself? So you're the one scaring yourself and creeping yourself out because you're just having to do something that you don't even like it when other people do to you, and now you're being asked to perpetrate it on your own body. So just kind of that body horror element. The ghost aspect of it came out of the fact that there was no game loop. If you fix your dental problems, then what do? Like, you're done. So I was like, okay, how about this then? You're a ghost who has a successful dental practice with living patients. The patients come in, you possess their body in order to do their dental work. So basically, about a dentist who was unwilling to let go of his successful dentistry practice after his death. But that created the narrative background that allowed for a game loop that could be continuous. So you could have new patients coming in, new diseases, new problems to deal with. And then going back to the body horror element, to really send that home, I created a face mask, and I used this resistive rubber band. And I found out about this from Robin Baumgarten. He had just made like a little prototype game where you're stretching it and like bouncing animals or something. It was really cute. And I was like, oh my God, that's such a cool, like, just piece of, because especially how simple it is. It's just a stretchy rubber thing. And I love components that are so simple and can provide so much versatility. And so I strung that through the VR helmet to the face mask. And that allowed me to do a one-to-one tracking of how open the player's mouth is. So at the very beginning, you would just have the player kind of just stretch their mouth open and closed, and that would calibrate it because it would see what their maximum was. And then we could track that pretty well. And then the final piece to the puzzle was sewing in vibrational motors, like in cell phones, around the jaw, so that as you were drilling certain parts of your teeth, it would vibrate those teeth. And the best comment I got when we exhibited this at Amaze in Berlin was that it actually felt more realistic than actual pain because of the disassociation you have with a sensation when you're anesthetized. Because you don't necessarily feel the pain itself, but you can still feel that there's something grinding on your teeth, that there's vibration happening. And so it fascinated and upset people, which was exactly kind of what I wanted.
I mean, that's
out
a
of it.
magic combination, isn't it?
It really is. And when we'd exhibit it, there was never a line, there was always a cluster. And when somebody finished playing, because people like to watch it, because people also look very silly in VR, as we all know. So have them doing their own dental work, and that just ramps up. So it's very hilarious to watch. But people would kind of look around at each other like, all right, who's going to go next? Who's going to volunteer? Because it was like, all right, who's going to give of themselves to entertain the people around them? And that spectator component was unintentional, but actually ended up being one of my favorite parts about that.
That's so cool. This is not a smooth transition, but I'd like to know, what would you consider your first out-control game, or a playful hardware game, or whatever, but use of tangibility to be the first one? Because usually in this part of the show, I directly say, oh, and your first game was, but for you, it was really hard to define exactly.
It was Choosatron, straight up. When I was working at a, I'm blanking on words, just building apps and doing some installation stuff for an agency. Why can't I remember the word agency? So, you get a bunch of clients doing lots of commercial work, and we were doing a big project in the Cosmopolitan Casino in Las Vegas. So it was this big installation, and I was working on the code side of that. And there was a content team in New York that was working on the simulations that would be running on top of this. So it was syncing just all sorts of screens and everything together. And one of the calls we had, I was just kind of pinging them. We had a little extra time, so I was just asking them questions about how do they prototype? How do they do their creative prototyping and like test out their ideas? And they're like, oh, we use Arduinos and da da da. And that was still kind of the main board at the time. Like that was the one of like really affordable way to get into that stuff that was just very accessible. And I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. I've seen that. Like, I've always wanted to play around with that. But it's just one of those things you never get around to. And the week after that, there was a package on my desk at work with a new Arduino. And it was them just being like, here, now go do something, go make something with it.
Awesome.
And I felt like I was like, well, I have this responsibility now. Like, this wasn't something I bought that I was like, maybe I'll do something and then check it in the drawer. Like, they gave this gift to me, and I was like, I have to do something. So I went to adafruit.com, I went to sparkfun.com, and at the time, I believe on Adafruit, you could literally go A to Z on components, like just the entire list. And that's what I did. I just read every single component, what it did, what it was for, because I didn't know anything about it. I didn't have any background in electronics. And when I ran across the coin acceptor, I was like, oh, hell yeah, that's awesome. I want to make something with a coin acceptor. Like, I miss that feeling. And I remember when I'd been to Las Vegas for some of the projects I was doing, I was so disappointed when I found out slot machines no longer like took coins or shot out coins. It's all just numbers. It's all just digitally handled. And I was like, but that was the fun part. I was going to be fine losing my money to you if I got to have all the jingle jangle, but that's gone. So I was like, screw that. I want the coin acceptor. And then once I hit the thermal printer, the whole idea was instantly in my head. I was like, I want to make an interactive fiction arcade machine. Because I had a deep love of like choose your own adventure type stories and all of that while I was growing up. I thought their quality, even as a kid, I was like, it could be written a little better in some cases, because I was a huge fan of Douglas Adams and reading Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. So I wanted this like really clever, deep fantasy and science fiction and all that. And I was like, oh, if only you could have those kind of authors like creating that kind of content. But that whole idea was all in once. I did one order of parts, and that was when I built the first prototype of the Choosatron, which is right here actually.
Let's have a look at it.
So it's got the coin acceptor. It's a Amazon box, I think.
So I mean,
got the old print.
And that keypad at the top, is that is that just there as? Is that a functioning keypad as well? Is that just decoration?
Yeah.
Yep.
No, this is a functioning membrane keypad. So it's got just kind of a little bubble, and you can feel the click, but it's very, very thin, and it's got just a thin cable that goes inside, which you might be able to see here. So you see that cable coming down, and then you've got the thermal printer, and then a little box to catch the coins, and then you could see a SparkFun prototyping thing. It's got an Arduino stuck in it, and then it's got just a little breadboard. And this was the absolute first one that I ever created.
Wow.
And I would bring it over to friends' houses. And this was before I didn't have any intentions for this. I was just like excited I had made something that worked. And it was such a good learning experience because I had this set of parts. I had keypad for input. I had printer for output. I had the coins as another form of input. And so what I did was, because I did have a coding background, so that was actually, obviously a big advantage to me. I basically isolated each component, and I was like, okay, how do I talk to the keypad? And I wrote test code to just figure out how it worked, how the matrixing worked, and then just being able to reliably use it. Then I did the same with the coin acceptor. I did the same with the printer. And then once I felt like I had a basic understanding of each part individually, then I started coding them together and creating the actual, just kind of that synergy of components and how am I going to actually play a story on it? And how am I going to author that story? And how am I going to get it on the microcontroller? And solving more of the technical software problems, which, although were somewhat complicated, I had more of a background to draw from.
So how did you go from you had the prototype version in the cardboard box and everything.
Yeah.
And obviously there came a point, particularly when you needed to ship it out and stuff, you needed something that could be manufactured. Like, how do you, and presumably you're working out all the kind of the Adafruit prototyping parts out of there and replacing them with presumably more compact version. How do you do that? How do you make that transition?
Yeah, it started, so that transition, I'll try to make this quick. So once I had this one, there were friends that were running a literary magazine locally. And so they would have some parties every once in a while. And they were like, hey, we'd love it if you brought one of these to the party. And I was like, oh no, every time I move that box, it would stop working because wires would pop out. So then my first step after that was I need to create one that can actually survive being moved. So I made this one, which was just hand cut foam board. It's just a straight up box. It has a top slot for the coins. It has a more robust keypad and then a larger printer so it could hold more paper in it. So that was purely to solve the problem of there's going to be people touching it all evening and I can't fix it every 5 minutes or it's going to be terrible.
Yeah.
So that was the first step. And then after that, when I started getting encouraged to start thinking about doing a Kickstarter, and in between some of this, I had gone to London on a sabbatical for like a month and some change, and I happened to bring the raw parts of a Choosatron with me. So no case or anything, but I thought oh, what if I just want to tinker and sit around at a pub and program for a while? It's nice to have a project. And I was invited to a storytelling conference from a friend over there. And while I was there, I happened to have all the stuff in my backpack and I showed it to some people. And one of them worked for Wired UK. And so he wanted to write an article about it. And I was like, great, this is awesome. And so that meant, of course, I had to make another one because I wanted it to be a little more presentable. And as much as I love the coin acceptor, it's not super practical at events because I would have to bring a thing of coins and then keep refilling the coins. And so that just got to be a pain. And by removing that, it meant I could change the form factor to be quite a bit smaller.
Right.
And so this was my first attempt at still using a cardboard box. It's just spray painted, but reducing it.
That is considerably less.
Yeah,
wiry.
Considerably less. And I'm not even using an Arduino at this point. I'm using the Atmega 328P chip,
right?
But it's completely built on my own board to remove any unnecessary components. So that's to answer part of your question. That was step one. Is well, if I just buy only the pieces I need, I don't need this special board. I don't need this other stuff. I have a program where I can put these chips in, and then I have stories on an SD card that it pulls the data from. So this was kind of that first step, getting in that direction of what can I take away? Even though I may not want to take all those pieces away, if I'm thinking about what this is for and who's going to be using it, how can I take that away? Because I can travel with something this size. That's easy. But it's a lot harder for the big box to be able to move around. And this was also the first one that was completely soldered. So that board is solid because every joint was I personally soldered down, and this needed to survive because I had to mail this to London so they could photograph it, so they could use it, whatever, and then mail it back. And I was terrified that it was going to fall apart. So I did my best to make it super robust and have the only points that could be a problem, well, just plug it back in.
Yeah.
And then when we got to the Kickstarter, that's when it really became a quest of what does it mean to make something a product? How do you actually reduce it down to those points? And I had some friends that did PCB design. So this was the first Choosatron that was specifically made to be a consumer product. So that board is a completely custom board. It still probably has some unnecessary components on it, but we've got the SD card, You've got power, you've got a power switch, you've got some regulators, resistors, and then there are some test points and some connections to inputs that I had in case I wanted to do some other special features.
Right.
But this was the one that was originally going to be the Kickstarter unit, and then this was a very slight evolution of that, where we were working on where you could print out faces for the Choosatron.
Right.
So there would be an application on it that let you like print out special faces. You could kind of customize it and make it feel your own, but it's all still the same design, just all screwed together, laser cut components. And then what happened was I met the people at a company called, I think at the time they were called Spark, and then they changed the name to Particle. And so they had the Spark Core microcontroller, which was a lot more powerful than the Arduino. It had internal storage that, at least for texted like interactive fiction games, was more than enough to like have a set of 10 or 20 pre-installed, and it had Wi-Fi. So I got very excited about this. We kind of formed a partnership where they were helping me out with their chip and supporting me and giving me a decent deal on the actual microcontroller itself. And then that turned into what this one is, which is the final unit. And let's see if we can, that's the wrong side. But this allowed me to make essentially a dummy board that you would plug in their microcontroller rather than having it all built in to one piece. And the Wi-Fi aspect of it was meant to be a way to drop in pieces. So this is the new custom board, and then that board on it is their Spark Core microcontroller.
Right.
And so my board doesn't do a whole lot. It plugs in the printer, it plugs in the keypad. I did include special spots there so I could create arcade versions of this. And you can see the word coin right there. So I actually had kind of a desktop version that I was able to build just using the same board, where I could put coin acceptors in, because I wasn't willing to let that concept go, because I liked it. I liked it a lot. And I wanted to at least be able to build them myself, even if others couldn't. And then this is the actual chip that runs it.
Right.
And I believe I own the only remaining ones of this, because they discontinued it. And they gave me a chance. I bought like a couple hundred before, they stopped, so that I have a supply where I can like continue creating Choosatrons using the original chips and boards and not have to completely redo everything, which may or may not come in handy. Once I have access to a laser printer again, maybe I could actually start selling them again. But that was the evolution. It got all the way down to this kit, and as you can see, like all the panels fall apart. There's no screws. It's all just like pulling these pieces out and plugging it in. For me, it was really important, especially for kids, that it be a kit that they get to build themselves, but did not require any soldering or anything like that. Because I know that right there can be a really big barrier, because I don't know many kids with soldering irons. I don't know many parents that love their kids using soldering irons. That should maybe change, but Rome wasn't burnt in a day. So
that's fascinating, this kind of devolution of Choosatron, basically. Actually, you have one behind you that is also the GDC alt-control GDC 01 version of it. It's the only piece missing. Yeah.
So is that a Choosatron as well, or is that something different?
It's technically not. Actually, this is running off of a Teensy board.
Right.
So it's not actually running off of any Choosatron hardware or software. The only similarity technically is the thermal printer.
Right.
But when I was asked to design the award, so when I made the award, I basically made two, mostly because I was worried if something went wrong with one, if it got lost in the mail, and I wanted to have a backup. But my hope was that I would just be able to keep it so that I had just another example of a piece of work that I did, and it was a lot of work.
Yes, I can imagine. So
But
this was the trophy that got given out to the winner of the Alt-Control GDC
yeah,
award in,
In
was it 2018?
2018,
2018. Yep. And so each piece here is slotted in vertically, and has stuff mounted to it. And then I designed it specifically so that the tension of the paper would push it up and through the screen. So like if I turn it on,
I like this. It's backlit.
it's hard to, yeah, it's hard to see because it's backlit, but
maybe if you bring it up close to the camera or something.
That's so
gosh,
nice.
it's so bright. And then if you fiddle with these for a bit, because you see it's just printing out noise. If you fiddle with them a bit, then it prints out a clear picture. If only I could turn off that backlight. But this one is The Simpsons, and every channel had a different printout. See here, you can see them easier, like as they come back out the top. So one of the channels was Star Wars, one of them is The Simpsons, one of them is a horror movie, and there's a Great British Bake Off, sweet theme cake, and then one of the channels is the Welcome to the 2018 IGF Awards, and then it would pause for a bit, and then it would print out the winner, so it would announce the actual winner. Ooh, and then a nature channel.
That's
so
amazing.
It's basically this. It's very over-engineered, but it was really, really, really fun to do.
Yes, and I
Getting
guess
the tension right.
Yeah,
was a pain. But these are touch sensitive, so you could play with that. And then this is the power switch, and the more you turn it on, the brighter the LED is. And you can't really see it over the camera, but it's a warm, flickering LED. So it's supposed to give off this kind of TV, old-timey TV feel.
Yeah, like
and then this is, like 8-switch rotary, so that I could have a channel for everyone. And then I just did ASCII art for them all. And so it was meant to be like a whole process where you turn it on and the TV's noisy. You play with the antenna, it clears up the signal, and then you navigate the channels until you find the channel that's playing the IGF Awards. It was complicated, but I'm actually really proud of this piece.
It's awesome. It's the best trophy I guess I've seen. And what's interesting in this version of Choosatron is that basically the first Choosatron was made around 2013. Stop me if I'm incorrect. And this one was made in 2018. And in the span of 5 years, you made a bunch of games that have this retro vibe, using old TV screens, rotary, dial, phone, etc. I'm thinking about Afterglow, which is one of my 3 favorite game in a briefcase, with Wind of Venus from Robin Baumgarten, and the other one is the truly terrific Traveling something from Jess Market.
Totally,
And you have this, like, can I say, kink for retro communication device? Or
I think that's fair. I think it's totally fair. I love old technology because when you look at how things were designed, so many of the decisions that were made out of necessity. It was necessity of materials. It was necessity of, so this phone, it has a sticker on it that says property of Michigan Bell, not for sale. And that's because you didn't own your phones. These things were expensive. And like the bakelite material and everything was very, very strong. Like it was meant to be like probably more durable than your walls. Yeah.
It's the phone from your game, Dial ! We have a video for this.
And it works. This is a Bluetooth phone. So there's the on-off switch.
Okay.
If I turn this on, it'll pair with my laptop and it will type. Like
So just so you know,
like if
we're
I went in a
showing a
chat right now,
video
I could do that.
of that phone in action at the moment. But let's have a look inside.
And inside, you've got that power switch hanging out the side, and
Oh
then
my
it's
God.
actually just an easy key by Adafruit that's wired up to the rotary. And the beautiful thing about rotaries, and actually this is to answer part of your question about why I like old technology. I mean, one, it's those different design aesthetics. Like, why did they do things the way they did them? They didn't make a rotary because it was intuitive, right? Like, they made a rotary because they needed a mechanical way to handle this like interesting problem, and they needed to communicate using pulses.
Mm.
And so that's how it works. You have basically two circuits on a rotary. One that opens when you begin dialing and then closes when it finishes dialing, and the other that opens and closes every time it passes a number.
Mm.
So you wait for one circuit to open, and then you count how many times the other circuit opens and closes, and then you stop counting once the first one is closed. And now you know what number was dialed. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
And so with that, like this thing, it just prints out characters. So I think it's like prints out the letter D when it starts dialing, and then like prints out a bunch of letter P's when it's pulsing down. And when I made the game for it, that's how simple it was. I didn't want to deal with any complicated Bluetooth communication. It's just pretending to be a keyboard. It's sending ASCII characters. And then the game that I wrote for it with Lisa Brown, actually, she was the one that also worked with me on Ghost Dentist. It would just count up how many times the character was typed, and then it knew what you dialed. But that simplicity it is really beautiful to me, that these old components, they're also easier to interface with. Like, you open up technology now and you've got chips this tiny that are doing a million things. I love the old clunky stuff because you can actually see it and you can connect to it. This is the original front board of Please Stand By. So this is a television control board, or the interface board for a 1951 television. And I was able to use at least some of the original potentiometers. But they're just all wired up, and then they end up emulating a game controller. And that hooks into Unity. The one I didn't think I was going to be able to pull off for that was the rabbit ears. These are the original 1951 rabbit ears. And inside, I was able to glue potentiometers to each rabbit ear so I could detect them being turned independently. And so then when you're playing Please Stand By, that's one of the things that the actions you have to do is mess around with the reception by bending these back and forth. And they make solid stuff back in the 50s, I gotta say.
And also in Please Stand By, it comes back to the storytelling and narrative design too, because in this game, the theme is also a retro theme, like just for the audience. Basically, it's about exploring the US relationship with war via a series of interactive vignettes. I think that's the way you put it.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
so you come back to the storytelling and narrative design background we talked about in the intro. So it's not just about like, oh, it's cool to hack old stuff, but also you use it to give some meaning to the game. That's so awesome.
I think pieces like this have power, right? I mean, they're represented in pop culture, whether or not you existed in the time where people were using technology like a rotary phone. Like there's a certain power to them, and they connect to the times in which they were created, and they have their own stories to tell. So for me, it's like when designing an escape room or theming a space, it is about those details. If you want to tell a story, set in the 1950s, then being able to build in some of the ephemera from that time period and actually make interacting with a part of that experience, I think, can just be a really powerful way to connect all of those pieces together.
Mm.
I mean, is your
Yeah.
has your because you have a theatre background educationally, like you minored in theatre, you did some training at film school. Like, are there things that you've learned from from your time in theatre, like that has influenced how you would approach an object like that as a kind of storytelling object?
Oh yeah, I think definitely so. I mean, I think if one thing that you learn in theater is how much you can do with very, very little. Like what you can do with like just implying, certain things, implying, the functionality of a thing, implying the meaning around a like some space, whether it's empty, whether it's negative space. Like there's so much that you can communicate by focusing on kind of the right details and helping to bring like your audience's attention to where you want it to be. I mean, so much of storytelling is this, I think, really fascinating interplay between, throwing information and whether it's visual stimuli, whether it's text, whether it's voice, whatever, you're throwing the stuff at somebody that they're taking in, but then also crafting those spaces where they're taking part of it, and that may be them just filling in with their own experience, or them actually taking part, as with games and alt control games especially, and actually touching and feeling these different things. I mean, just like when you feel something like the plastic on that rotary telephone and the plastic of something made now, it's probably going to feel very, very different. Like the temperature is going to feel different. The how much it bends feels different. And I think even little details like that communicate about like what this device was for, and what kind of importance was bestowed upon it, that it was valued,
Yeah.
that like it's not cheap, it's important. And then with things like Please Stand By, I also really enjoy using the subversion of the things that we didn't like about these designs. They were imperfect. They had to deal with limitations of the time. So having part of the interface of the television being hitting it to like try and get the signal to realign, or having to screw around with these different components, like that wasn't a fun thing when you were trying to watch TV. Like it was just a part of life, because it was new technology, and it was difficult to work with, and it was expensive. And so I enjoy revisiting like both the good and the exciting parts, and also the frustrating and difficult parts of those experiences, and try and weave those into the story, and what that's like. But yeah, theater I think is a huge influence, because there's so many places where it's easy to put more when you can do so much with less. And humans as an ingredient to interactive work is kind of incredible, because there's so much you can pull from a person, and tie it to the thing that they're interacting with. That's why local co-op games, like they don't need to be nearly as complex as single player experiences. No, they might be, but you can get away with a lot of cheating, because playing with somebody else, it's less about that specific game. It's more about facilitation. The mechanics of that game are facilitating communication between people, relationships between people. Like even like your work, Alistair, with game shows and stuff. That's one reason I find it just incredibly fascinating, is that it's like this incredibly performative work that is connected through mechanics and rules and other things that help to have that play out.
Thank you very much.
The other thing in your work that is perceptible and that could, I assume, come from theater is that many of your work feels like stage design or stage set in a sense. I'm thinking
Yeah.
of channel, which is basically a living Ouija board with channels, messages coming from TV signals, or way more recent, we have burning ritual, and all this feels a lot like stage design. Like when you see the interfaces, they are part of the lore, they are part of the
Yeah.
diegesis in a way, and
Yeah.
that's interesting. I mean, not all alt control developers think of it that way. So is that also
No,
something
that's
coming from
true.
theater and
Yeah.
such?
I think so because along with acting, I really did love prop building and
Mm,
mask making and just creating these pieces that would give you that focus, right? Like you've got a completely blank stage, like having, an old TV on a stand over here and a rotary telephone over here. Those things are super important, right? Like,
mm,
and so I think with theater, it's really powerful to then you don't need to fill the entire space with tons of stuff, but like give the importance to the things that need it, and give that detail to those things. Like, and I think with a lot of creative work, it's tricky because you need to be really mindful of keeping things equally crappy in a way. Like you don't want one thing to have, you don't want the sound design to be just ridiculously good and professional, but then other aspects of the design not get much attention, right? You want
mm,
things to like lift up in some kind of direction together so that they all reinforce each other. And in theater, like I think that's true, but just in a very different fashion where you want to mute the spaces or aspects of it that you don't want people to be distracted by, and really like drive in that focus so that, I mean, lighting design, all of that, obviously that's a huge part of like helping people know like what's important, what they should focus on. But yeah, I think the act of like prop making and prop building is really fun and fascinating to me because you are then having to decide what's important about this object. Like if I'm making a prop telephone, what do I need to make work on that telephone? Does it need to ring? Does it need to actually dial? Does it need to actually connect to other things? Like it'd be easy for someone like me, I think, to go overboard and make it a fully functioning like intercom
mm.
system so that they could talk with somebody in the booth that's doing playing a remote character. But you don't necessarily need to do that.
And prop hacking too. You did a lot with Craigslists, and Amazon stuff. I'm thinking about Robomama's Cooking Kitchen, which is one of the most surprising game. I mean, when it comes to physical aesthetic of the objects, it's it's like an exception in your portfolio. And I think it's because you're hacking stuff you found on Craigslist. Sorry, we don't have this in France, so it's hard for me.
Yeah,
Craigslist.
yeah.
And maybe you can talk a bit about this. How is it working for the audience? They
So
can see the video.
that there was that one was made. There was kind of an IoT, like Internet of Things hack day that I was attending, and a good friend of mine, Christina Derovich, back in Minneapolis, brilliant woman, like done all sorts of wonderful hacking herself, and she found this on Craigslist for like $5, and so she was like, let's hack this together, let's make this, and I was like, this is awesome. Let's take this cheap like play kitchen set that doesn't do anything, and let's make it do something. And so it was a really fun experiment of like starting with kind of a secret ingredient being kind of thrown in our lap, and trying to decide like what could we do to bring out some of the qualities of that, making the faucet functional, and like how do we, we wanted hot and cold water, so how do we indicate that? And so we used like the embedded LEDs that would animate to show that there was water flowing, and then change color to show the temperature.
Mm,
And then all of these vegetables, we kind of decided on this, like, okay, if it's going to be a cooking walkthrough experience, that we need a way to detect what ingredients. And the quickest way I could come up with was install an arrangement of capacitive sensors in the frying pan, and then have all the vegetables and ingredients have a certain pattern of capacitive pads. And they all had the same number of pads, but some of them were just foam and not capacitive at all. And then by placing it on, it would just check, okay, which capacitive sensors are being triggered. Oh, that's the apple, that's the cucumber, whatever. But yeah, that was just a really fun kind of game jam for us for a day to create this weird kitchen experience. And the RoboMama's Cooking Kitchen component of it was, I can't help but whenever I'm making something to build a story and world around it, even if the players are never going to know what that is. And I think part of it, it's fun for me. Like, what universe does this object live in? You know, why does it belong? And then the other part is, I think it's actually a useful tool for designers to maintain consistency with the storytelling that's evidenced through how something functions. If I'm making decisions about how something works, like Afterglow is another example of that. I had a very specific world where that game lived in. And the whole story is that, like, the Soviets are like have this super weapon that's just almost ready. It's so close, but they don't make it. It's too late. The super weapon is unveiled. You're able to like start fighting back using this special like briefcase super missile weapon, whatever it is, but you're doomed. And the game is framed where no matter how much damage you're able to do, you're not going to survive. And that was partly an extension of classic old games like Missile Commander, where you don't win the game. You just see how long you can keep like this onslaught at bay. And so there's a sense of hopelessness. And I wanted to like, and you don't generally feel super hopeless when you're playing Missile Commander, right? Like, even though it is hopeless, that's not what it's evoking. And so for this, I was like, I wanted to latch on to that. And I want you to feel a little bit hopeless. I want it to feel dark and like, well, dang it, if I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory. and for RoboMama, it was obviously less dark than that, but that same kind of design principle where I wanted to build a basis of a world for this thing existing. And it was about a robotic caretaking entity that would teach you and help raise you and teach you how to cook. And like, by just like, you know, putting this light on, it's like, oh, that's the ingredient I should use. And I'm not a great cook, and I would love to have a RoboMama that like I could be like, okay, I want to make lasagna, and it's like, all right, and then it just lights up I got to get the noodles over on the shelf and get the sauce, and you know, a little lights up, go over here, I got to get the cheese from the fridge. And so it was just about this like domestic robot that was meant to help kind of raise you a bit. And I think there are some other weird parts to that story that I can't remember, but I just like that consistency of like, as I make a decision of how the game works, making sure that fits within the world that I've already kind of established for it.
That makes a lot of sense. Before we just want to interrupt because we are nearing towards the final segment of the show, which means that it is the time for me to introduce the audience interaction game. So steady yourself.
Dun, dun, dun.
Are you prepared? I mean, you don't have to be prepared right away, but you've got like 10 minutes to steel yourself, you know? So what's going to happen is, and this is a segment that we do every week, is we are going to ask you at the end of our show to come up with a new game or a new controller. What will this new game or controller be made from? It's objects suggested by the audience at home. So, audience at home, I am going to press a little button to switch on the bot. So the bot is now listening to what you input. And audience, if you type exclamation mark followed by some words, then it will get added to the pool. So Bubble Reg has just added a smoke alarm to the pool, and the audience is free to add as many different objects to the pool as they want just by typing exclamation mark followed by the name of the object in chat. And then in roughly 10-15 minutes, it will be your quest, I guess, Jerry, to come up with a game made out of these things. Do you think you can do it?
Game.
Come up with a game pitch.
For games.
A game pitch, to be precise.
I can do this. I dream bad game ideas.
Well, you dream about your games. Like you dreamed about this game Revolver, which is a Western themed tabletop game. You designed it a dream.
Yeah.
You said that on your website. So
totally designed in a dream. I woke up and I wrote down all the instructions for it. I designed a new dream the other night, except it was through the framing of two friends, Robin Baumgartner and my friend Helen, showing me this game that they had made using cards on the ground. It was very strange, but I feel like they kind of own it, even though I technically came up with it. But I don't really know how intellectual property rights work when it's dream design.
And while the audience is giving us some words, I will ask a question from them. Bubble Reg asked, or Reg, Bubble Reg maybe, asked, are there any particular older machines or older tech that you would like to do something with but haven't yet?
So like specific like microcontroller stuff, if that's kind of the question, my favorite boards to work with are the Teensy boards are one of my absolute favorites. It's super well supported. It's pretty cheap, and there's a crazy variety you can do. I used to teach an alternative controller class, and I'd start them out with a Teensy LC, which stands for low cost, because you can emulate keyboards, mice, game controllers, touchscreens. And the beauty of that is you could then take existing games and make an alternative controller that works with it without having to figure out a complex communication layer. Or you could just make completely new experiences. Another board I've really enjoyed using is the ESP32, and they're coming out with some new variations. Again, very powerful, but that one integrates more Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and some other wireless technologies that can give you a lot of flexibility. And they have like an S2 now that has some new features and gets rid of some of the ones from the standard one. So those are my favorite boards to play with.
I mean, if
as
you
far as
wanted
like
to-
other tech,
Well, I mean, I think I think what Bubble Reg was asking about was, and do correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what he was asking about was, you know, like things like the old telephones, the old 1950s TVs. Like, are there any
TVs
objects
and such,
like that you'd
I
like
gotcha.
to explore that you haven't done yet?
Well, tech was part of the question too, but
Okay.
I think this is
fair enough.
Yeah.
There is actually. I was looking at stuff using the telephones that they'd use on submarines that were just direct connection, and they were unpowered. So I was really fascinated by the idea of using technology that specifically it's using electronics, but it's meant to work without any kind of power source. And the idea of communicating between multiple players within a space with kind of like intertwined, interconnected. You don't know which phone's going to what. So that was one thing I was noodling around with. M Laserwalker already got the telephone like switchboard stuff.
Yeah.
So
with the
good.
jacks.
So good.
Yeah.
You got to take a look at that project.
Yeah, it's Hello
but
Operator.
I mean, because those are so satisfying. Hello Operator, thank you. Because I mean, there's something really satisfying about quick plugging cables back and forth. My friend Helen that I had mentioned, she does a lot of like sound-based stuff, music instrument stuff, and I had been playing around with like what you can do synthesizer-wise on some of these controllers. And lately, I was specifically interested in the sensation of when you dip your fingers in water and you raise it up and you have these like droplets hanging from your fingertips and you kind of like, drip them off. And I was really interested in making a kind of semi-melodic instrument that's just water-based. So using kind of the semi-random like flicks of your fingers to trigger tones and stuff like that. A lot of games I think I come up with start out as toys because I'm interested in a particular interaction or a piece of technology like they're bringing up and wanting to incorporate that somehow. Or Alistair, like even what the stuff we'd talked about somewhat recently, I'd gotten interested in like books and using and controlling the turning of books, which is morphed into a different thing. But the original concept being I wanted to control the rate at which like the pages of a book turns as a way of representing information. So like, I mean, what's more, I mean, as a piece of technology, like, because a book is a piece of technology, right? But
Yeah.
like, it's very, very basic when it comes to like what's involved with it. And yet the idea of controlling the way a book changes its state, the way the pages flow, is actually a very, very complex problem.
And it's an interesting object, that, because like just in terms of like what it conjures up, because the page turner of a book is very mechanical, very rigid, and the pages, they're kind of binary. It's either showing or it's not showing. Pages are numbered with integers, but the process of reading is very analog. It takes a very variable amount of time, and the images that you get in your head are totally like totally user dependent. And there is this interesting kind of back and forth you get with that.
Yeah. One of the other things that comes to mind is I've been interested in like wind. So I'd gotten some weather sensors. So being able to detect wind speed and other wind direction, stuff like that. And using air fans, small fans. So this is, I don't know, it's less like very specific pieces of old technology, but more like I think my interest has moved a little bit in the direction of like kind of natural phenomena and harnessing that to follow very particular sets of rules. Like, and I've come back to water for a number of project ideas where it's like having small boats in water containers and using wind and locks and moving things around, but as something that isn't just a toy, that has like very particular goals and multiple people influencing these different components. So it's something about like working with like those natural materials that are in some ways notoriously difficult to harness, right? Like water is not the friend of electronics.
Yeah.
One of the games students of mine made was like a battleship style game that they used using like spreadsheets, and then also having to actually like throw these like metal torpedoes in a thing of water and detecting that it's hitting the water, and then that initiating like a hit for the other side. So just a kind of a very basic example of that, but or the candles for burning ritual that Tatiana you'd brought up earlier. That was a weird challenge because I basically had to learn candle making to try and do this. But once I learned like, oh, you can buy wick that has a zinc core. Now, zinc is not the most conductive metal you can get.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to power something through it. I'm just trying to detect if there's a signal coming through it, or just anything at all, really. And so using that, I'm able to detect by using like an electronic lighter if it's being lit. I can detect your fingers when you put the candle out or when you put a metal capper on it. And it was really interesting to be working with wax and wicks and all of these like materials that are actually going to be burned and consumed in the process while trying to reliably take in data from them. And soldering to a zinc wick is not very fun, but it did work.
Mm. I like this idea of the consumption of the material in a sense.
Yeah.
Alistair, you work also with the book Ritual, which also have ritual in the name. I think
Yeah.
that's a sign. And it's interesting because these are objects we don't have the same relationship to. When you know this will be consumed, you don't have the same emotional relationship to the stuff. The burning ritual is actually one of them. I'm really excited about trying this. I really hope I will be able to try it because the mere idea of having a ritual as a game experience or a playful experience or whatever is, I mean, you need to go for a deep dive into human mind to really try to make something that feels like a ritual. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
And I mean, in burning ritual, just the voice, the way it speaks to you, etc., it puts you in a mood that is rare to encounter in the alt control world. That's really cool.
Yeah. And I didn't, like, the place where showing it didn't know I was going to be using fire, which is one of those like ask for forgiveness kind of things. And they didn't seem to mind. Like I was very careful, but like part of that ritual is not only do you have a candle, but you're actually asking the participants to after they've written things down on these pieces of paper to put them in this bowl and to burn them. And
but then
some people I think got very nervous working with fire and would actually cause problems because one person like put the burning paper in the bowl, and then for some reason they were worried about the fire in the bowl, so they blew on it.
Oh.
And then like little bits of flaming paper flew up into the air, and I was watching and I was like, that's not how you do that.
But it does, I mean, doesn't it add so much to the experience when you know that there is something taboo about what you're doing? You know that, burning stuff, like, let alone, I think burning most stuff is considered a bit dangerous, but, burning stuff willy-nilly at an exhibition, it's something that you're not doing. So it adds to the atmosphere. It adds, attention to the experience, which I guess speaks to the kind of theatricality of it.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. And yeah, it definitely is like a really important element of that mood building, like you were saying, Tatiana.
So I'm looking at the time, and
yeah,
unfortunately,
exactly.
we are starting to run out of time. That does mean, Jerry, that it is time for you to play the game. How are you feeling? You feeling pumped?
I'm ready. I mean, I don't work out too much, but I'm as pumped as I can be.
Yeah. Well, you're going to be working out the creativity muscle.
Oh yes.
So
the greatest muscle in the skull.
So I am about to press the big button, which will reveal the objects from the many objects. Thank you very much, everyone, for submitting these. The bot is going to pick 5 of them totally at random.
Okay.
For you to make something out of. So your objects will be a Furby, an umbrella,
oh my God,
a vacuum cleaner, a cash register, and a smoke alarm.
The gazebo wasn't picked up. Okay.
Neither was the 1960s style handheld mixer, unfortunately. Although you can feel free to include that if you want.
Wait, what was the 1960s one?
1960s handheld mixer.
A handheld mixer. That's good. Okay, so we've got Furby, umbrella, vacuum, cash register, and smoke alarm. Okay, so what I'm seeing here is we have got I'm thinking a bakery situation. We've got sprinklers here that are going to be potentially turning on water. Got the smoke alarm, and the Furby is our baker. and the Furby's being given commands by the user and how to bake this stuff. So um, the big problem being, of course, that the Furby is a very terrible baker, and without very, very precise instructions, is going to end up burning stuff, making a mess. You've got flour, so we have in one part of, I almost see like a diorama with like the Furby central and rotating, and then that activating different parts to begin. And when they move over to the flowers, like to the station, it poofs out flour. So having like, I don't know, I could probably rig up a small vacuum piece that both sucks in and expels. So having and then having a valve so we can push out a ploof of flour.
Oh, that's
Uh,
nice.
and then being able to suck back up to clean. And that'll be dual purpose, because the interesting thing about flour in the air is that it becomes very flammable. So there was a great flour fire in Minneapolis years ago, many years ago. And that's what happened. It's a flour dust in the air and like, poof, bad news bears.
Wow.
So I would want to then have an ignition so that we can light that up, and that be a form of like, oh, you've done something wrong. So we poof up the flour, we can start a fire. That's a mechanic. That, of course, is going to set off the smoke alarm, and that, of course, sets off the sprinklers. So you then, part of the game is not only trying to get through the series of steps to properly bake a thing, but when things go wrong, being able to mitigate those circumstances. So you don't want the Furby getting wet. So you need the umbrella, a little umbrella, like those like tiki ones that
Like
can
in a cocktail.
extend and pull down. Yeah, like a little cocktail umbrella. And then so like customer comes in, I want, this particular thing baked, and maybe a little bit of that like RoboMama, where there's kind of like the lights and indicators of like what are the steps you need to do. The Furby with its deranged speech capabilities, probably enhancing that a little bit. Or we could flip this around and the Furby is the guest. So have the Furby,
Right.
like the customer, they're on a track that like rolls in, and then this automated kitchen, which maybe is kind of like oh, what's the machine? What's the machine, like the fake chess playing machine? Uh,
Oh,
and there's a man in it.
oh, I
Why
know.
am I
Like the
blanking on this?
mechanical turkey
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. A mechanical Turk, of course. Yes. So you're the mechanical Turk of this like futuristic like baking kitchen. And so Furby comes in and creepily says what it would like, and then you need to like make this happen, dealing with the flour combustions, dealing with the smoke detector going up, because then also having an atomizer that's creating vapor that will set off the smoke detector, having like a little cute oven that like sends out like atomized vapor. So you've got that setting things off. And then if you don't get the umbrella open for the customer in time, then they get like, irritated, and then they go off in a little huff. I don't know, whatever
Is
creepy thing the Furby is going to do. Cash register, I think, is the only thing I haven't integrated yet. But presumably, like, this is a business. This isn't charity. We need
I
to
mean,
get paid.
there's a reason that Choosatron still has inputs for the coin counter in there,
Right? Exactly. That's funding my desire for an occasional chocolate bar once a year that the nickels all make me. Okay, so the cash
I have to
register.
say, I love how much you've just dived into this just fearlessly right away. Like there's not been a second of hesitation.
You're taking my design time. Okay, so now Furbies are futuristic devices, right? They probably don't deal with paper cash or coinage. They're probably more of an Apple Pay or an Android Pay. So I would probably take an NFC component that you then like need to articulate with the Furby. So it's going to get a scary arm of some kind so that it can go up and like touch the pay pad when the transaction is complete. And then detect that, and then maybe a little display that's showing like how much money you've made, and then with penalties for the customers getting wet, so you lose money. They don't leave a tip, so if things go really well, they ding ding little tip, and then if the rain goes off, if the sprinklers go off, well, then you've like probably ruined some supplies. So getting dinged for that. So it's like, how much money can you make in a day of business with this like robotic Furby diorama of a futuristic baking kitchen? And we call it, fur bacon.
Fur bacon.
Or bacon, sure.
Oh my, that was.
Hey, they're not all winners.
That was beautiful. That was like, I mean, I would build an elevator just for that pitch.
Excellent. I'm guessing they probably wanted like a full size cash register, but maybe it's like the whole thing plays out in like turn a cash register around, hollow it out, and that's like the diorama stage.
Ooh. Oh,
and then like use some of the cash register components just as like the and like connect those in, so you're not just playing, so all the sound effects are authentic, actual like sound effects from the actual device, using the mechanics of it for the sound and using that as the sound design. So you're not playing anything over speakers. It's all practical sound effects.
I mean, this is visionary, is what it is.
I want to play that game now.
I have never heard such a vivid description in this segment before. It was beautiful.
Welcome to my brain, Alistair.
So Tatiana, if everybody go and have a look at Tatiana's Twitter after the show. So usually, I don't know if you are doing it this time, but usually Tatiana
I'm trying.
Puts together an image based on what the guest described, and that will go up on her Twitter feed at MechBird. You've given her a lot to work with, so
yeah, that's hard. To be honest, like the cash register may be an old one because I'm struggling. Like I had to choose a Furby, and this took me like 10 minutes. So I'm doing my best here. Okay.
Well, I am looking at the time, and I realize that you do need to head off soon. So, Jerry, is there anything else that you'd like to say before we close the show?
Oh, let's see. I don't know. As far as like stuff I'm working on now or in the future, it's such a weird time, right, for alt control with the pandemic and everything. And on the one hand, I think it's been wonderful seeing people evolve and adjust with that, like how you folks have, both with like doing stuff like this to bring more awareness to it, streams like the Sonic stuff, Alistair, like and some of that stuff has really opened my eyes of like, oh, there's a lot of ways that we can play with the concept of alt control without it just being in-person physical interactions, and I think that's really powerful. Another thing I've been excited about is the Playdate, which is a small handheld contraption
with a crank,
and it has a crank, and I made Choosatron for it.
Ooh.
So it's got a Choosatron parser with it, and this was a way for me to just play with like producing something without having to deal with lots of components and stuff, because I did a move across country this year. The pandemic has eaten up so much energy, and that's been, I think that's what I like to talk about very briefly, is how like what it's like dealing with periods of time where, I mean, things inside your control, but a lot of things outside of your control put you in a situation where you can't necessarily do the kind of creative work that you generally feel compelled to do. And I think it's a really hard thing where you don't have the energy or you don't have the time, and not having the energy to do it, even if you have the time, is incredibly frustrating because you want to be doing these things and it feels very insurmountable. And so like one thing I want to say to people is be real easy on yourself because it is a really difficult time. And even when you get into some of those periods of whether it's like burnout or just kind of the oppressiveness of how terrible the world can be sometimes, like give yourself a break and let yourself heal. And sometimes it takes more time than you like, but like that stuff doesn't go away. The drive that you have, the things that you're interested in, it may like evolve and change, but you're never going to just stop being that person. And that's something I've been trying to like work through myself, and find ways to gently keep myself engaged with new creative work without making a lot of pressure. And so like programming for the Playdate was a really great way for me to do that, because I got to take this really creative, unique piece of hardware that supports kind of these alternative controller methods and use that as a muse for creating some unique things rather than having to do everything from scratch and be like, what's the point? I can't show it to anybody. Nobody's going to know it exists. Brr. And it's tough because sometimes we do work for external reasons. Like we create something as a response to things that are going on in life, like whether it's a response to political things, whether it's a response to something like the pandemic or isolation. And sometimes we create in response to our own feelings and what we're trying to personally process. And like Nature Machine, that's an example of that. That was I created that with Victor Thompson, a really great collaborator. He's the one that collaborated with me on Please Stand By as well. And like that one was a tough one for me because the reason I wanted to make it was because I was burnt out and I felt like a hollow husk of a human from like doing too much and doing an MFA full time while teaching full time while doing other work at the same time. And it was too much. And I was trying to think about the concept of meditation and what that means to someone like me who has a brain that, for better or for worse, sometimes does not quit and doesn't want to slow down. And I have a hard time relaxing and I have a lot of anxiety. And I wanted to create something that latched, like connected to my brain, but wasn't trying to get it to solve things or to win a thing or to min max a thing. And these like procedural nature simulations and the music with that was all about that. And so bringing that to live events, the goal there was have a place where people could calm down and relax and not be necessarily overstimulated, but not feel like they were missing out on something. So they could still be taking something in at maybe a little bit of a slower pace and something that could just zone out with a little bit. So I don't know. It's a tough time to be a creator, I think, for anyone. And I think we all need to both like connect and take care of each other and like find those right collaborations and everything when you can, but also to just be really forgiving of yourself for all of that stuff.
Thank you very much.
That's an awesome final word. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. That's I mean, I think we can all relate to what you're saying, and that reassurance that what you just said, I think is because I think, you know, I'm sure we've all find ourselves in those places which you just described, and I'm personally, that is, you know, very, very similar to where I find myself right now. So like, you know, personally, I just like thank you very much for that, like those words, that motivating sentence. I wish I could articulate it better, but I just think that was like, really touching.
I think it's easy to see people that have done a lot of work and you're like, oh my God, look at this portfolio. But like, they need to know that there's a lot of struggle and a lot of stuff that goes into that. And it's hard. It's hard for everyone. So don't give up, reach out, talk to people like me. I always try to help people on Twitter and all that. So please don't be afraid to reach out on Twitter or whatever. And I always like to try and help when I can. But thank you so much for having me, Tatiana, Alistair. This is great. I'm so glad that you're doing this at all. I think it's inspiring for me. It gives me energy and hopefully a lot of other people.
Oh,
So cool. Thank you for being here with us tonight. And I think you have to go. It's literally time for your next meeting, I guess,
Yeah.
appointment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
All
Thanks
right.
again.
Thanks so
thank
much.
you very much,
Bye,
Jerry.
everybody. Thanks for
Bye.
watching.
Now, as Jerry moves on, thank you very much for joining us, Jerry. Just a few announcements in terms of what is next for us all here at IndieCade. So at 3 p.m. Pacific, so that is in an hour and a half's time, we have the Korean Drive Time show where they will be playing the game Replica by Somi. So this is a game which is it's a narrative game played on what looks to be a replica of a mobile phone interface on your computer. Looks very strange and mysterious. And then at 6 o'clock Pacific, we have monster readings with Zach. So Zach Wood will be doing tarot readings with monster-based tarot cards. So please do tune in for that. Have yourself a tarot reading. I've had a monster tarot reading myself from Zach, and it was very delightful and enlightening. Finally, the Beyond Screens show, which Tatiana and I are part of, is every Wednesday, is the Beyond Screens here at 12 noon Pacific. There are... and here's the bit where I forget where I was on my script. But yes. So the Beyond Screen show features creators of playable theatre, escape rooms, and public play, as well as our alternative controller show on the fourth Wednesday of every month. So keep your eyes peeled every Wednesday here on the IndieCade Twitch channel. Also on the IndieCade Twitch channel, the highlights from the IndieCade Horizon event have now been uploaded. So this was an event where recent graduates from university and college courses were able to show off their work. So if you want to see the awesome new games coming out of the amazing new generation of talent, then have an explore here on the IndieCade Twitch channel. So without further ado, I'm going to switch us back so you can see both of us, Tatiana, but we are I'll have to move there we go. This looks about right, doesn't it? You can see, if you lift your head up, you can just about see us. But yes, Tatiana, any final words before we head off into the night?
Sure. Goodbye.
Goodbye. I think that's a good nice ending. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Bye.